All right, I am here. My name is Dhati Lewis. I'm the lead pastor of Blueprint Church, and I am the executive director. You didn't know that. I don't know if you knew that. Executive director now at the North American Mission Board. So I'm moving on up to your status and your level, but I'm here with a good brother, a good friend, Walter Strickland, who is at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. So you always have like every title. What is the title?
It's Associate Vice President for Kingdom Diversity Initiatives. And then my faculty title is Assistant Professor of Systematic and Contextual Theology.
See, I just really feel like the longer the title, the more important you are.
Well, see, I was trying to shorten it up because now my business card folds. I'm just playing.
You got a trifold?
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking. No, but Walter, I'm really excited about just having you on. Very similar to kind of what I did before. This is the 21 Days Reflection. I'm just trying to get with thought leaders. Anytime I can get around with people who are thinking about the issues, the real issues that are going on. We are here at the MLK 50. And, and I just really want to talk with you about this, however you want to frame it, the divorce from white evangelicalism, whether it's the mass exodus. There was a recent article by the New York Times of the quiet exodus, and historically what we've seen is 10 years ago, there are probably a little bit more than 10 years. There was a mass exodus out of kind of the black church by African Americans into the white church and white evangelicalism. And now we see kind of the shift. There is a shifting, according to the New York Times, of minorities or African Americans leaving now the white churches. I want to get to the fact that a lot of times, and even I think the article talked about, they're not necessarily going back to the black church. They're not going anywhere. But before we get to that, I mean, just kind of what are your just general thoughts? I know this is a very complex issue, but what are your general thoughts about that?
There's so many layers to this that I wish we had time to go over, but we'll just try to hit some of the high points. But, first of all, my heart just breaks for the whole thing, to be honest with you. I think that we are a people who are broken, trying to live this marvelous picture of what it means to be the people of God. This every tribe, tongue, and nation, this one new humanity. We're trying to walk this out, but because we're broken, we just stumble and fail at times. And so I think that the stumblings and failings, which we can talk about, which are causing this exodus, are really sort of tripping us up. And to be honest with you, I think in our country, the issue of race is almost demonically supercharged as being, a divisive agent for the people of God. I think the adversary is using this particular issue and just exploiting it. And so a lot of the abuses that have happened in our country are still sort of plaguing us because it's almost like we're looking to our faith to be the thing that sort of is helping us rid ourselves of this. But we have to begin to reimagine what is Christianity, because oftentimes this idea of Christian maturity is sort of interwoven and braided into this sort of cultural supremacist sort of reality. So all that to say, well, to try to unpack that, what we've done is that in churches that have a dominant culture, not the dominant culture, but a dominant culture, oftentimes ideologies and cultural leanings get woven into what it means to be a Christian. And so when you had this sort of exodus out of the black church, of black people into white spaces, there was this theological affinity there. But what we began to see as cultural events like Trayvon Martin happen, as the 16 election cycle happened, as these events with black men and law enforcement began to unfold, we were looking for those people who we shared theological affinity with to share this heaviness, this burden, this outcry with us. And oftentimes African Americans in white churches felt like they were alone in their tears. Yeah. And so all that to say, there is this, hey, are we actually family? Do you care for me? Are you trying to bear my burden? As I've bore your burden, as we've read the Bible together, as we've become this family, are we truly family is the question. And I think that the answer is yes, in theory, but in reality, in practice, in daily living, it didn't feel like it. And so I think that's why people are leaving the white church and not really going anywhere. But
well, let me ask you that. I mean, on that, because you kind of been operating in this space at Southeastern for a while, right? You're, like you said, director of Kingdom Diversity. One of the
there you go. That's fine.
So executive director or leader, grand poobah of Kingdom Diversity at Southeastern. How has that been in, on one end, trying to diversify a school? Because that has been historically kind of the push for people like us, is like, how do we diversify? How do we bring more minorities into kind of white evangelical spaces?
Yeah. And so I think there's two levels that have to be hit. The first is a systemic level. There are systemic realities that make it prohibitive or more difficult for black and brown people to be a part of these historically white institutions, because as it is with anything, we build things to help support the person who built it. And if black folks built institutions, it'd be built to perpetuate brown and black folk being there. And so there's systemic and structural and procedural things, policy issues that we're working on and changing those to make it easier for all of God's children to be there. But that also has to be paired with this sort of cultural IQ, this sensitivity from one person to the next of what it means to actually interact. And so if we're only hitting one of those targets, it's going to feel uncomfortable.
Well, how long does that take? I mean, I think that's one of the things that we've seen, along with what you were saying. There has been a disenfranchisement in a sense, and now people are now leaving. The question is, how long should it take? We are now celebrating 50 years, right, since the death of Martin Luther King Jr. And while some will say things have gotten better, some will say things are remaining the same. Yeah. And so for a job like yours, how long would it take for us to see significant change?
Yeah. So I think since MLK's death, things have gotten better, and they've stayed the same all at the same time, because we're talking about so many different. So I mean, if we're talking about race in America, or even the things that influence the fabric of our society and the fabric of the church, I mean, to be able to sort of tease all those things out and to unweave the fabric of cultural supremacy in all those, it's going to take a long time. And in fact, I think we'll only see this Revelation 7, 9, and 10 every tribe, tongue, and nation, and truly and deeply be one new humanity when we get in the kingdom. And so I think that's a picture that we should be shooting to emulate. But this is where my contention lies, is that in our striving for that every tribe, tongue, and nation reality, it's the people that we become in the process that God is after. So it's not necessarily actually getting there, because I think only the divine enablement of God through glorification when we're in the kingdom will only get us there. But I think in our striving, we become people who are more loving, more compassionate, more kind, more trying to work together in humility, listening to each other better, loving each other, and really looking out for each other, utilizing our privileges on behalf of not ourselves but other people. I think it's in those strivings, in that daily in and out, that we actually become more like Christ, which is sanctification. So I think what God is doing is, yes, he's given us this vision that we should shoot for, and we should. And I don't think we're ever going to get there on this side of the kingdom. But it's in our strivings that we become people who are more like Jesus. Yeah. And so, just real quick. Yeah, no, it's good. So I think that how long is it going to take? I mean, some people are more satisfied at point A. Some people are satisfied at point D. Some people will never be satisfied until we get to point Z. And so, how long should it take? Is sort of it's hard to nail that down to the wall, because everyone thinks we've arrived at different points. But I do think it's going to take some time to actually hit both of those targets, the systemic and also the interpersonal realities. But I do think we're making progress, and I hope that in trying to make progress on both of those fronts, people are transformed so that they can bear each other's burdens in a new way, both in an interpersonal sort of mourning with each other, because we've sacrificed, my opportunities for success on leveraging that for somebody else, in the sort of systemic realities. And so I think those work together, but I think we're never actually going to arrive. But I think we're definitely making steps. And it's just a matter of, having the steps being made systemically as well as interpersonally, and those begin to create an environment where people can hang with each other better. Yeah, that's awesome. One more question before we end it. There, specifically you,
because, as you talked about, it's going to take a long time, different people, different, for you, someone who is engaging actively in this space, right? You're dealing with this. Where are you at personally with this conversation? Again, with trying to bring more in to aiming for that picture, but also seeing that exodus. Where are you specifically?
Yeah. So I'm encouraged and discouraged all at the same time. Yeah. But to be honest with you, for me as Walter Strickland, I'm not speaking for all blacks, what have you, but I do think that God has ordered my life in such a way to take the beating that I take on a daily basis. And I feel, and I feel like my emotions welling up, because I think that if I look back at my life, at the steps that the Lord has brought me through, I think He said, Walter, go ahead and do this, make the way for others. Yeah. And it's going to be lonely. People are going to call you names on both sides. Hey man, you're moving too fast. Hey, you're moving too slow. And all those sorts of things. But I do think that there are people that might also feel the same sort of burden to move, to be those who just are up front doing that work on behalf of people who look like you and who come from the same background. And so
I have to ask you this one more. I know I said, but you said taking the beating. If you can just briefly, again, tell me emotion, because a lot of times people don't understand the heart behind those words you said. There was so much in the beating that you're going to take from both sides.
Yeah.
As we end, and as you kind of, again, we're personally reflecting on it, you're in the center of that. How does that put a drain on you, your marriage, in total?
So sometimes doing this is the loneliest thing that I could have ever imagined, because there's people who are excited about progress. There's people who want to do it, but there's people who don't agree on the pace of change, And so, a lot of times at night, I have to just go before the Lord and say, Lord, what should I do? Because everyone people I appreciate are telling me all sorts of different things. So I have to go before the Lord, go before people I trust, and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? And then even when they all say different things, just go before God and say, hey, what do you have for me here? Yeah. And so, there are moments of just deep sadness that draw me close to the Lord, because it seems that at times that it's just like me standing out there and trying to do something that I think is worthy of the gospel that has saved us. But at times it's just tough, but it's worth it. Yeah. I mean, it's worth it to go out there and just keep pressing on. It's worth it to go out there and to try to create scholarship, programs for people who are economically disenfranchised. And then so on the one hand, I'm being told, hey, it's not enough, you need to do more. But on the other hand, people are calling me a reverse racist for trying to establish funds for folks, but are sort of earmarked for ethnic differences, racial differences, and what have you. So, but I think the Lord is kind. To give us that loneliness at times. It sort of presses us into Himself. And so that beating has sort of transformed me as well. And so I'm grateful for it, although I wish I didn't have to take it.
Amen. Well, you're definitely a man of passion, and the way I define passion is a willingness to endure the pain for something that's greater than the pain. And I really appreciate your passion in this subject, and I will continue to be praying for you as you press on.
I appreciate it, brother.